They are the biggest economy in Europe, so you would reasonably expect that they will use their power to uphold democratic values in the world, to protest against any violations of human rights or rule of law. Well, what if I tell you that that biggest economy in Europe is one of the most vulnerable to manipulation, outright blackmail from an authoritarian country because they are bound too tightly together by trade? Who am I talking about? Of course, I am talking about Germany. Welcome back to Streamlined Insights, the most international and scientific measure of the world. I'm Streamlined Engine. Now, when we talk about Germany, you have to think back to about a year ago in March 2022, when Russia unexpectedly launched a full-scale invasion into Ukraine. And in response to that, Western countries, Eastern Europeans, the whole European Union, Great Britain, Canada, USA, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, all of them, they slapped unexpected and unprecedented amounts of economic sanctions on Russia, limiting their business-making and trading capabilities on the international arena. And about those sanctions, Germany was one of the slowest countries to come on board, and even after they came aboard, they are still finding ways to navigate around those sanctions. And when people see them doing that, some are outraged, saying whether Germany is actually trying to navigate and mitigate those effects that the sanctions are going to have on the Russians, that Germany is not sympathetic to Ukraine, that Germany is actually favoring a continued trade relationship with Russia. Well, that is not precisely accurate, because with the scale that German business is, Germany's whole country and Germany's business is entwined with Russia, it is actually quite surprising that Germany is willing to go to the length that it has already done to sanction Russia. But precisely because of the extent that Germany's economy is tied with Russia's, Germany really has no choice but to navigate very carefully through those sanctions. I'll give an example. Germany imports 35% of all the oil it uses in its country from Russia. And if that surprises you, Germany imports a whopping 55% of all the natural gas it uses directly from Russia via the two pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, traveling beneath the Baltic from Russia straight to Germany. So, all in all, Germany's entire energy consumption has about a third of capacity that is wholly dependent upon Russia. Now, if you are surprised as how this came to be, like, it's pretty obvious even after the end of the Cold War, like the reunification of Germany and the collapse of the USSR and the birth of the Russian Federation, all that, even after all that, it is very apparent that Moscow doesn't believe in the same thing as other Europeans do. So you'd be very surprised that Germany found itself in such a critical natural resources, fuel reliance on Russia. And even if you discard all of those questions about values and beliefs, it is still quite surprising from a purely business point of view that Germany has never considered diversifying its resources. Germany has never tried diversifying its risks. Like, there's the North Sea, just a little bit beyond its borders as well, and it has quite good trade relations with the Arabs and with the Africans, so why hasn't Germany ever considered importing a bit more from them and a little less from Russia? Well, it turns out it is not a purely business decision-making, and it is not even a purely geographical decision-making precision either, because obviously Russia is much closer to Germany than the North Sea or the Arabs or the Africans. Of course it's that, and of course they're on the same continent, so building a pipeline straight from Russia is considerably cheaper than to import from anywhere else. Yes, there is that. However, the most important reason behind Germany's huge quantity and such a prolonged period of trading with Russia, despite all those ideological differences, is actually an idea that you might have heard before. The idea was that precisely because Russia is an authoritarian country, that Germany has to trade more with them, because with increased trade ties, Germany will be able to rein in Russia to be a more responsible actor on the international stage. Not to mention that when you brought economic wealth, where you just bring prosperity to that authoritarian country, then the people of that country will inevitably desire democratic changes, and Russia will become a democratic country. Now, if that line of reasoning sounds familiar to you, then yes, this is precisely what we've talked about a few episodes before. This is the change through trade doctrine. And in fact, Germany isn't just following the change through trade doctrine. The change through trade doctrine was invented by Germany. And it's not just any German political scholar or something like that. No, it's invented by German politicians. Von der Handel. It was invented in the 1970s. At that time, it was just West Germany. And it continued on all the way to 1990 and until up to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. From Schröder in the early 2000s to Merkel for more than 10 years, and then to Olaf Scholz, the current Chancellor of Germany, they all pursued a policy of some similar note, some similar idea to a certain extent. You can see this chain through trade doctrine at work best when you think about Nord Stream 2, which was greenlight, constructed, and approved to use after 2014, after Russia has already forcibly invaded and annexed Ukrainian Crimea. Germany was one of the few countries that did not strongly condemn Russia's actions, and it continued to believe that when continued trading with Russia, Russia's actions will not turn into a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Some German politicians actually said so in public, that they truly believe Nord Stream 2 will prevent Russia from even more aggressive actions. But it is not just in Russia where Germany got a very rude wake-up call that their chain-through trade is not really working at all. Another instance of chain-through trade not really working as the Germans hoped is in China. By far, Germany's largest trading partner, and in verse, Germany is China's largest trading partner in Europe as well. How much is that bilateral trade, you asked? Tens of billions of euros. And when you don't count it in numbers, German car manufacturing tycoons Volkswagen, Daimler, BMW, and then electronic manufacturers like Bosch and Siemens, they all have huge plants in China. And the benefits of doing business in China, that we explained last time, all these German companies have experienced that, and they really like that. Like low taxes, government subsidiaries, infrastructure construction, and a direct pool of huge customers in the form of Chinese population. But just like in Russia, chain-through trade is not really working in the Germans' favor. Like, they are not democratizing China, not like they are not democratizing Russia at all. In fact, what happened is that power in China is gradually being held more and more tightly by the Communist Party and by Xi. And what really happened, just like in Russo-German relationship, is that Germany is much more chained to this trade to the will of those authoritarian countries. And Germany has imposed democratic changes on them. For example, in 2018, when BMW posted on social media with a quote from the Dalai Lama, the exiled leader of Tibet, which China viewed as separatist, Chinese social media was outraged, and BMW, fearing business repercussions, apologized to China. And then in 2019, when Hong Kong was protesting against the law that's going to stripping away the democracies, Germany is one of the few democratic European countries not to protest loudly to the Chinese government. And then in 2020, when most of the world was trying to find out what is going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, and when they were struggling to figure out how to get their essential life products when activities in China shut down, Germany was one of those few democratic countries that insisted upon good ties with China. there are a few nuances to this. Like, it is not simply for the fact that Germany likes China or something like that. No, Germany was hedging itself against an irascible and unpredictable USA at the time under the presidency of Donald Trump. And of course, Germany has done that a few times before, like for example, during the Iraq War under the presidency of Bush. Germany considers China to be actually a much more stable trading partner, business partner than the USA. And of course, there is the factor that Germany is, on the whole, not as comfortable about lecturing other countries on human rights and other things like that because of its own historical baggage. But since the term of office of Olaf Scholz, when he took office, I mean, Germany has become more and more acutely aware that if anything is to happen in China, or China does something against the international order, then Germany is going to be in big, big trouble again, just like they are in big, big trouble with Russia right now. Like, in Russia, it's much more serious because it's about natural gas and about oil. This is the livelihood of German families. This is the production capacity of German factories. In China, it's not about as serious as that. It's more about exports and imports. But even if it's not about fuel, even if it's just being a shutdown of cars, of clothes, and other materials and consumer goods, it's going to be serious. So that is why Germany is really starting to explore options aside from continuing trading with China. And the simple act of them doing that, you can see that they themselves, Germany, the proposer of change through trade, is now accepting that it is not working as well as we intended. That is a big deal. And that is supposed to be a wake-up call to anyone else who still naively believes in that. So what exactly is Germany doing to diversify its supply chain? Well, chips for a start. Dresden-Saxony has invented a scheme, a huge subsidiary and luring scheme that invites TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, to set up a manufacturing plant, a fab, in their city to ensure that Germany's access to chips, Germany's chip supply chain, is not disrupted by any Chinese action in their borders or on the international arena. It is a very big deal that Germany is actually doing this, because throughout all this time, to ensure good relations with China, Germany has refrained from interacting with Taiwan too much. So just by doing that, you can see that Germany is re-evaluating their options and is re-evaluating their strategy on how to proceed next. But then, of course, when even Germany is doing that, some of you would say that Germany is trying to decouple from the Chinese, decouple from the world of globalization, the global supply chain. Well, I can only say that decoupling is not even possible if someone tries to attempt it. Even though de-risking, not decoupling, may sound a bit underwhelming, a bit anticlimactic, it is very much the truth. Because it doesn't need to decouple. Businesses and ventures have been plowing into unfamiliar territory to do business and to reap huge wealth for millennials. Chinese merchants have been venturing into Central Asia and Eastern Europe. Western merchants have ventured into the Americas, into Africa, and into Asia. So it really doesn't need to de-risk for someone, for a business, or for an entire country for that matter, to properly manage their risks and to ensure that their businesses are not caught up, their country is not caught up in the dilemma that Germany is caught up in right now with the lack of Russian fuel because of its pursuit of chain through trade throughout these last few decades. Germany, throughout these last few decades, has committed the really grave error of reducing international relations to just trade and economic wealth. The accumulation of economic wealth is never about that. International relations is one of anarchical relations. The difference of ideology will always matter, as long as the international system remains that way. So Germany is now realizing its mistake. Anyone else who continuously hold that idea, whether you're a business or individual, needs to understand that as well. And it doesn't mean that we have to go to war for every tiny ideological differences. It's not that. It's that in the simple, very simple doctrine of doing business, diversifying your risks, or de-risking, as they like to call it nowadays, is like the core pillar of doing anything, the core pillar of doing business. Germany has learned this lesson the hard way, and it's a very rude wake-up call. And if Germany has learned this lesson a lot sooner, then it perhaps doesn't have to experience a 2 to 3% shrinking of its economy, courtesy of Kiel Institute, and it doesn't have to endure, the people of Germany wouldn't have to endure a harsh winter where fuel prices, natural gas and oil prices are soaring through the roof to 10 times, even 15 times more than what they were a few years ago. If Germany has actually planned on changing their exchange duty rate doctrine a little bit earlier, that can all be avoided. But better late than never. And Germany is starting on the right path right now to diversification of its risks. Everyone else should be aiming to do that as well. Otherwise, in terms of authoritarian countries, and not just because of their ideology, in purely business and technical terms, it is very dangerous to hedge all your possibilities and all your profits on them and ignore the risk of their arbitrary actions. Germany is already a victim of that. They themselves don't want to be that again. I don't think any of us, a country, a business, or an individual, wants to be that either. We talked a lot about how Germany learned its lesson after Russia rudely, unexpectedly, and brutally invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. How Germany has learned its lesson because it has to navigate through the necessary sanctions imposed upon Russia and to uphold its democratic values while ensuring its own economic interest and ensuring that its own people don't freeze to death in the winter. I talked about a lot about these sanctions, but when we talk about sanctions, it's a whole nother deal completely. Like, what are sanctions? And do sanctions work? Are sanctions necessary? Well, we are going to tell you all of that in the next episode. The whole next episode will be dedicated to sanctions. And if there are anything else about the international arena, international trade, the technological developments of the international arena, or any other political subjects relating to business and technology, you can sound off in the comments down below and tell me what you want to hear. I'll be very interested to know what you all think as well. Until next time, I am Streamlined Engine, and you have been listening to Streamlined Insights.